I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're diving into a powerful novel, a real page-turner. It is called Death Above the Potomac. It is a gripping political thriller written by one of my favorite guests, one of my favorite authors, John Chierichella. Vicki Cole had it all: beauty, power, and an empire at her fingertips, until she was found dead in her lavish home overlooking the Potomac. With high-stakes corporate intrigue, deep secrets, and a year-long unraveling of deception, this book is a must-read for fans of suspense and mystery. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us once again here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Books to Life Marketing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. And be sure to download the Spotlight Network TV app, streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. John, welcome back to our show.
Thank you.
Great to have you on. This is a terrific book. Kind of reminds me of Laura, which we talked about in one of our other interviews, in that the protagonist dies immediately in the beginning of the book, and then we look back at her life. Tell us a little bit about Vicki Cole and your inspiration for this story.
Well, as I've told you when we've spoken before, Logan, I practiced law for 53 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually specialized in government contract law. So within the government contracts field, I did a fair amount of work dealing with what the government likes to refer to as overhead assets, surveillance satellites. So I thought that if I was going to write something, I would like to write something that dealt with the type of business in which I'd been involved for a long time, dealing with facts and circumstances that I had become familiar with in the course of my career, so that I could bring what I hoped was a fair amount of realism in the way I dealt with the issues. You know, for example, one of the issues in this case has to do with fake test reports for accelerated life testing for a surveillance satellite. And I'm familiar with accelerated life testing for surveillance satellites, having worked on legal matters relating to satellites. So that's just one aspect of how I tried to build some of my own experience into this. But I also like the idea of killing off the main character on page one, and then spending the book by backtracking and trying to follow over the course of the preceding year how we got to that point. That only gets you to the middle of the book, because from that point forward, it's who done it.
Yeah.
And the first half of the book is designed to set up the characters who would be potential murderers, and to develop the reasons and the rationales for it. The characters that I try and develop in the first half of the book all have different reasons, perhaps, to want to harm Vicki Cole. Her father was passed over for the chairmanship of this closely held company by his father, and he placed it all in the hands of his granddaughter. So you have that resentment.
Mm-hmm.
You have Vicki deciding that she doesn't like this life anymore, that it's 24/7 constant pressure. She hates having to kowtow to politicians, to generals, to admirals. She feels herself slipping away and losing herself in this job. And so she's decided to sell her stock. It's a closely held company. Now, that means that everybody in this business who's had sort of a sinecure for their entire lives is now at risk, because when other companies take over, what do? They put their own people in.
Yeah.
They clean house. So everybody now is at risk. But the person who's most at risk and the person who is most angry is her father,
Hmm.
because it should have been his company in his mind, and he doesn't think that his father ever would have left it to his granddaughter if his granddaughter was just going to go ahead and flip it to someone outside the company. So you've got a lot of suspects, and when you get to the second half of the book, you're introduced to some more characters. Most significantly, the detective who's investigating this death, who's getting a lot of pressure because Vicki Cole is a very high-profile individual. The police don't like having high-profile murders
Mhm.
going unresolved, and he goes about his job and he makes a promise to Vicki as he's standing over her body. I will find who did this, and I will make sure they pay. And the rest of the story is designed to find out, can he keep that promise, right?
Yeah.
And you're unsure as you're reading the book, can he keep this promise? And I tried to build this in a way that made all of the potential suspects really ring true. In other words, they all had a legitimate reason for doing this, and actually, the book does not resolve the murder.
Mm.
Now, you may think that's a horrible thing, but there's an epilogue for those who are interested that
Mhm.
will flip back to the day of the murder and explain what happened. But there are a lot of cross currents in terms of who's doing the investigation, how the investigation is being done, an internal investigation regarding the anomalous test results on the satellite, which has significant monetary consequences for the company. And I had a lot of fun writing it because I was writing about stuff that I understood. I was writing about stuff with which I was familiar, and I was developing characters that, quite frankly, I know.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of these characters in this book are based on people I actually know. Now, I'm not going to tell them who they are. Actually, I do have one friend who knows he's in the book, and his one request when he read the draft was, "Can you make me younger?"
That's funny. That's funny. I have to put a disclaimer at the end of the movie or the beginning. Any resemblance to real life figures, living or dead, is purely a coincidence. Which
Well,
I
yeah.
know it's not, and not in your case. I think in all the cases where they have those disclaimers, they're
Uh-huh.
true, which
There's
is
actually even a
wonderful.
character in there that's me.
Yeah, cool. Very cool. Hopefully, you're not the killer. That's for sure. Let me ask you this. First, let me give you my impression. I love the fact that Vicky dies right away because it drags you in immediately. Immediately, the story is kick-started, it's jump-started. She's dead. What happened? And I think that's a great literary device. I think it's a great cinematic device as well. If you watch a lot of TV shows like Blue Blood, for example, it starts out immediately with the crime. It doesn't show the characters on their merry path and then a crime happens, after the third commercial break. No, crime happens first, and then we find out what the backstory is. So I think that's a very, very gripping device. And since I'm talking about cinema, have you envisioned this as a movie?
Um, I think this is a hard one to. I think it's hard to film because there are so many cross currents.
Hmm.
Um, if you were going to do this, I think you'd have to do it as like maybe a mini series,
Hmm.
maybe a 3 or 4 part mini series to develop the characters and develop the tensions. Um, yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. A series, a limited series, or a TV series would work well as well. These stories that do have a lot of nuance, that do have a lot of backstory, sometimes need the time to be flushed out properly, and
Mhm.
that gives you the number of hours to do it, no doubt. This must have been fun for you to write because one, like you said, you were writing about some people you knew and fictionalizing them, of course, and you were writing about an industry that you knew about, the defense industry and satellites and so forth.
Yeah, it actually, um, I became very focused on being meticulous in some of the descriptions because I knew that if some of my colleagues read the book,
Yeah.
they'd be looking to try and figure out how they could call me up and say, "You screwed that up, John."
Yeah.
Although I did get only one comment. I got one comment, and it was somebody who was describing the scene in which the vice president, who was involved in the test anomalies, was
Mhm.
being um, questioned by the people who were hired by the company to figure out what happened. And he said, "John, that is exactly how it happens." And so I felt good about that because that's an area that he practiced in internal investigations of potential fraud in the government contracts field. And the fact that he told me it rang true made me feel good.
Yeah, and ringing true to an expert in that field is one thing. It's also going to feel very real to our viewers and readers as well, which I think is terrific. And I think that's the experience people want. They want to get immersed into a world that feels real, and that's how you get lost into it.
Mhm.
Did you consider multiple endings before settling on the final one without any spoilers, of course?
Um, yes. You've read the book, so you know that at the end of the book, it kind of boils down to five potential suspects
Hmm.
for the death of Vicki Cole. So it would have been possible to take it in any of five directions. I rejected a couple of them because they would have been uh, they would have it would have been a little bit like watching an old Perry Mason, where all of a sudden the person who's on the stand in the last 5 minutes of the episode is the one who's the killer.
Right, right.
And it wouldn't have had enough context. But there were even now, I've actually had someone ask me this question. So who really did do it? And but I could have seen three of those suspects as the killer, and I had to decide which of them I wanted ultimately to pin the rap on, and I had to figure out whether or not, as drafted, the novel created enough motivation within that person to do it. Because killing someone is a pretty damn personal thing,
Yeah, yeah.
and you have to have a real. I mean, unless you're just a cold-hearted.
Psychopath, yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, most murders are killed by people who know people, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
They're mostly crimes of passion. The people are
right,
angry about one thing or another and they get
right,
killed. Yeah, yeah.
right. Yeah, I did consider alternative endings, but at the end, I liked. Well, obviously, I wrote it this way, so I must have liked
Yeah.
the choice that I made, um, and um, and the rationale for the killing is really a little bit odd, except it's based on some of the internal conflicts of that character that are developed in the course of the book.
Yeah.
I know that sounds kind of vague and ambiguous, and that's because it is,
Yeah.
because I can't really describe those in this interview without telling your listeners
Yeah, we don't want to
done it
spoil
and
it.
why.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, well, you did a great job on this book, no doubt. Is there a message? Is there something you'd like the folks at home to read, to understand after reading this book? I mean, it's certainly entertaining, and that's reason enough to read it.
Well, no, unlike a couple of my other books, there's really not a message here. I
Right.
guess the only the only message that I would communicate is that life inside large corporations is never smooth. There are a lot of jealousies.
Mhm.
Look, I haven't been in a lot of corporations, but I've seen a lot of corporations at
Yeah.
work. I've seen a lot of large law firms at work. There are a lot of jealousies, and they can fester, and they can create problems,
Yeah, they're
as
almost
they
like big
did,
families. You have big
as they did here.
families, you're going to have problems too. I
Right.
mean, anybody who gets close, anybody who's competing for the same resources, whether it's attention, love, money, or power, are going to be at each other's throat for
And
every
in
one
this
of
book,
those.
what they're competing for is a whole lot of money
Yeah,
and a whole lot of power.
absolutely. It's a terrific book, folks. It is called Death Above the Potomac. It is a gripping political thriller. In it, you will find out that, and there's the book right there, Vicki Cole had it all: beauty, power, and an empire at her fingertips until she is found dead. With high stakes corporate intrigue, deep secrets, and a year-long unraveling of deception, this book is a must-read for fans of suspense and mystery. John, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you, Logan. Appreciate it.
Appreciate your time, sir. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.